So you're all very welcome, and this is a great event that Sandra helped or organised for the Ballymun Recovery Month. And today is a day for kind of stories of hope, stories of community support, stories of family support, and we hope it inspires everybody that came here today. So my name is Hugh Graves, and I'm the coordinator with the Ballymun Local Drugs Task Force, and we're delighted to be involved yet again in one of the events for Recovery Month. This is the 6th or 7th year of Recovery Month in Ballymun, and it's just grown from strength to strength, and it's grown to such an extent that we now run recovery events all through the year. So you probably have participated in a number of different events. So as I said, today is a day to celebrate recovery and to inspire others with the stories of kind of hope and recovery that we hear here today. Most of the speakers that you'll hear have taken part in the training course called Speak About Your Lived Experience. So you'll hear they've all participated in a training program, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more of them as they go from strength to strength on the basis of today and onwards. So our first speaker today is Professor Johanna Ivers from the School of Public Health in Trinity College Dublin, and I've about 6 paragraphs on Johanna's resume, which she told me not to read, but just to say that Johanna has been looking at the whole area of recovery for a long time now and teaches a course on recovery, and we're delighted that she's joined us here today. Do you want to stand?
So, can everyone hear me? So, listen, I'm delighted to be here. I was around at the beginning of the movement for, recovery and mobilising recovery in communities like Ballymun. So, I'm always delighted and heartened to be invited here. But Sandra made me come today because we're really good friends. And one thing we always talk about is this notion of science and community, and how the two of them influence each other and why they're so important. And as Hughie says, just to come out of the traps and say that, so I'm a professor in School of Medicine in Trinity, and at the heart of everything I do is people with lived experience. I don't do any research that isn't informed by people who have a lived experience, and I run the Masters in Addiction Recovery. It's not a shameless plug, but just to say that 1/3 of our population of students on that course are people with lived experience, and 1/3 of the faculty that contribute to the course are people with lived experience. So know that at the heart of my science is people with lived experience. And I myself come from Sean McDermott Street, and unfortunately from a family with lots of addiction, a community with lots of addiction. So in my own way, I have a lived experience too. So I suppose when we're trying to unpack why science and lived experience are great bedfellows, really it's about the fact that science is about telling stories, and it's about telling how something works. So what's the process behind it? What makes it work? What are the key ingredients? And under what conditions or how does it work is really what science is about. And it's about asking questions that will enhance the lives of people that we're trying to make the world better for. What the lived experience has done is it's brought the why. So why is it affecting people's lives, and how has it changed and transformed communities? And that's why I suppose the lived experience and science are such close partners. So, ultimately, that's the brief I was given. Talk about this notion of science and lived experience being 2 halves of the same coin. And that's the why, really. It's about bringing people's stories to life. And that's why we're all here today. And I'm really looking forward to the transformation that's going to happen up here on the stage about people bringing their story to life. So thanks for having me.
So our first speaker is, talk about inspiration. We're going to hear from Dee, who's going to do a poem that she wrote for Ballymun Recovery Month, and I think she debuted this poem at the Ballymun Does Recovery gig a couple of weeks ago there to thunderous applause. So, I have you down as rising up here. Oh, I beg your pardon. The production staff are going to be, there's going to be murder about this later. So can we hear from Dave, please?
How is this is called Out to Ballymun. I'm led to believe this is the first, and I'm going to finish off as well with Rise Up for Recovery at the end. Right, so this is called Out to Ballymun. Here we go. I was just a whisper, but I've always been here. For so long my echo cried out for my clan, my people, for you to appear. Exiled from our city back in the day, from nothing to nothing, you made me your home. I went on to lay roots, create families, kids and generations of your own. Into my green pastures and fields you came, and erected houses, blocks and towers in our 7 signatories' names. 13s, 36s and 36As have all at one stage ran through my veins. Shop vans, comps and roundabouts, breeze in the towers and penthouse. White Elephant, Fifth Avenue, Miss Mary's, Joe Wayne's are just some of the places you, your mum and your nanny have all been in. Boiler House, butter vouchers, swimming pool and Chester slices. And not to mention those crazy prices are crazy prices. Crazy indeed, but beneath the veneer and within my walls, it was heroin that nearly destroyed it all. Too many were lost to the needle, smoke and methadone. No family, no home, no circle of friends were left alone. A legacy of addiction, trauma, heartache and pain has left an indelible grief that will forever remain. They tore me down and built me anew. Gone went my towers and blocks that we once knew. Though my landscape changed, we've lost and we've gained. My core, my people, my community has remained. Heroes without capes, survivors, thrivers, warriors, each and every one. No one will know just how far we have come. So here's to my Ballymunners. God bless the youths, the all-rights, the how-yous, the what's the stories and what's the cracks. And finally, not forgetting, you up the flats, you up the flats. Thank you.
Yup D. So cool. So our next speaker is Brian Foley, and Brian, as you know, I think most of you know Brian. Brian has been instrumental in organising Ballymun recovery for the last number of years around the area. You know Brian, you see him cycling around a big penny farthing bike, usually. Brian is the Clients Programme Coordinator in YAP. He's a native of Ballymun and well-known face around services in Ballymun for many years. And Brian will show us in his story what connected communities are made up of. Sorry, I have to change glasses and all this sort of stuff. And apologies to Joanna, I introduced her wrong. It's the School of Medicine in Trinity. So, Brian.
Sorry. It's strange to be standing up here, especially when they give me a new hairy chest for the day as well. Gonna model that. So, I got asked to talk about community recovery. From wrong to strong. And so, how do you measure community recovery? It's easy enough to see changes in people, to see changes in families, to record them, to measure those changes. But how do you measure recovery in a community? When you look at this glass, what do you see? Half empty or half full? If I asked the powers to be, or people outside Ballymun, if they'd seen this as Ballymun, what would they think? Half empty or half full? I'm guessing if I took a poll, it would be half empty. But let me talk to you about the problem with focusing on problems. If we allow our focus to be on the half-empty part of the glass, we allow those problems to blind us and to bind us. We become blinded to the possibilities and blinded to the priorities that are there. We must focus on, I'm not saying we should ignore problems, But what I'm saying is that for us to work on problems, we must be resourceful. And for me, the resourceful bit is in the half-full bit. We must focus more on what's strong rather than what's wrong. As Yui said, I'm from Ballymun. And for me, community must be more than just a geographical location. It must be more than just a place on a map. For you, when you think about community, what does it mean to you? For me, community is about connection. Johann Hari spoke about addiction is isolation, but recovery is connection. And I remember Rob Murphy come up to me one day. Rob is a kind of prominent man in the community here. And he was all excited and he was all energised. And he was telling me about this talk he'd been to by a guy called Cormac Russell and John McKnight. And they'd done this talk on the connected community. And he bought these books because he was so enamoured with this presentation. And he gave me one of the books. Not sure why, but he gave me one of the books. Probably all he ever gave me, but anyway, he gave me something. So he gave me one of these books. And the book was called The Connected Community. For John McKnight and Cormac Russell, they wrote about the importance of building community from the inside out, rather than the traditional outside in. And so if I wanted to build a connected community, or I wanted to walk towards a connected community, what would I need to walk towards a connected community? Well, first, I'd need my people, my residents. Next, I would need associations, groups, things that they can be part of. Associations that build connection, have purpose, build networks for my residents, for my people. Things like tidy towns, Cocaine Anonymous meetings, neighbourhood cleanups, football teams, hurling teams, walking groups. I need different associations that people can be part of. And once they're part of those associations, they can build those networks and connections. Another ingredient I'd need for my connected community is the institutions. I need the institutions to bring their resources, their expertise to the table. Institutions like Drugs Task Force, DCC, YAP, STAR, HSE, the Law Library, those different organisations that exist in Ballymun, the cafes, the shops, the Rediscovery Centre, all of those institutions that have resources with them and expertise. I need them. The next thing, if I have my institutions, my associations and my people, I need places. I need spaces that they can come together. I need rooms in buildings. I need parks. I need streets. I need plazas. I need a theatre. I need spaces where they can come together. And once I've got my people, my institutions, my associations together in places, what is it that will connect them? For that, I need to create a culture. I need to create a culture of exchange. A giving of gifts from the head, the heart, and the conscience. Because it is the right thing to do for this community. I need them to give information to each other, provide knowledge, support each other, give someone a lift, help out, train the local football team, get people together for a litter pick. I need them to work together in exchange of gifts from the heart, the head, and the conscience. If I have all those together, the glue that will bind them, the glue that will hold them together is stories. I need stories that shine a light on community collaboration. Stories that focus a beam on stories about success in Ballymun, of achievements. Stories that paint a different picture. Stories that don't talk about statistics, but talk about achievements. We must talk more about stories than statistics in Ballymun. Our strength is in our stories, not our statistics. So if I have all those ingredients in there, my people, my associations, my institutions, my places, my exchange, it's the stories that pull it together. It's the stories that unite us. We must create a culture of storytelling. Our voice, our culture, our way finds its voice through stories. Sandra promised me this would work. If I was to do it. And look, she's free. So the stories are what binds us. The stories are what we focus on, our resources, our strengths. Today, you'll be part of other stories. You will hear people's stories that focus more on what's strong rather than what's wrong. I'm going to leave you with one question. When you think about your community, what is one thing that you can do over the next 7 days to make your community stronger? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. That was lovely, and the imagery was fabulous. I don't think the mix worked too well, mind you, but you can have a word with Sandra about that. And I'm just talking about stories. I don't know if people remember the Taoiseach at the time, Micheál Martin, visited Ballymun about 2 years ago, and there was presentations from all sorts of groups to him and stuff like that. And the only thing people remember from that day is him leaning in the window of the bus that pulled up to talk to him, and it was Teresa Lloyden driving the bus, who was a local resident here, and she wanted a word in his ear, so she stopped our bus and talked to him in the middle of the road. And that's the only thing people remember. So the stories are the important thing, really. So our next speaker is Tammy. And Tammy is a member of a family support group who've crafted a story that captures much of the experiences family members have been through when a family member or a friend is in active addiction or recovery. So the story is not real. It's a composite of a number of different experiences people have had. And the speaker is telling this story on behalf of the family support group. It's not her personal story. And for the purpose of telling the story, the role of dad has been chosen to represent the person who has experienced the addiction. Tammy was volunteered, in inverted commas, to tell the story. And luckily, she was a willing volunteer. The title of the story Tammy is telling is Families Recover Too. Please welcome Tammy to the stage.
I'm speaking on behalf of a family support group. The stories that we've come up with are a collection of experiences by family members of people who are in addiction or recovery from cocaine or any mind-altering substance. The family group meets regularly and speaks about their experiences. When we were reflecting on what story to tell, we decided to speak about some of the most stressful times in our lives. And we didn't have to think too far back. We went back to the August bank holiday. Just to refresh you our memory, some of you might remember, but it was a really wet and windy bank holiday. I think it felt more like the start of winter than it did the end of summer. So let me tell you about what happened. It was a Sunday morning and the family breakfast was on. The teapot was boiling away, coffee machine in the corner, batch bread was under the grill, super queen sausages on the pan and rashers flying away. Are you starving? I am. The kids were playing in the sitting room, full of joy, tearing around the place. Coco Melon was on the telly. The kids were that distracted running around that they didn't notice their dad coming in from the shop with the milk. Right there and then, we looked at each other. This is our dream. We have always dreamed of this. Why is our dream, you may ask? Well, let me tell you. The same bank holiday a couple of years ago, things were very different. We wouldn't have been sitting there having a family breakfast. The kids wouldn't be home because they were probably in their nanny's house or my friends or somewhere else. Dad wouldn't have went for the milk because he was probably out since Thursday night. I'd be frantically looking around, searching, knocking on people's hall doors, running through houses, tracking his iPhone, seeing where he was he in the background of pictures, how long was he there? Well, he said he was with his different friend. On one of these search parties out looking for Dad, one of my friends approached me. "Are you getting support too?" she said. "I don't need support," I said. "He is the head case." There's meetings for people like you, for family members of people who use substances or who are in recovery. Meetings for me? He won't even go to a meeting. Why do I need to go to a meeting? "Listen, love," she said. "You're tearing through people's houses. You're not in your right frame of mind. You're barely eating. You're not looking after yourself. You're sick too." Sometimes the truth hurts. But it's within a wake-up call that you realise you don't want to live a certain way anymore. I was on my knees. I went to the meeting. At these meetings I met other people who had experiences so similar to mine I could have swore you were living in my house. I kept going back, and through these meetings I was supported by people, and I supported them. It was a really powerful thing. From then on, we continued to grow together as a group. It was a turning point, and that's why our bank holiday was a dream for us. Because I wasn't at Dad asking him, "When will you be back from the shop? Will you be back?" To be honest, the thought didn't even cross our mind. We live a life now that's full of serenity, and the same people in my group. People in them group could be living with people who are in active addiction or people in sobriety, but no matter what the circumstance, their families are doing good. If someone you know is using or their sobriety is affecting you, there is family support available, and we are there to help. Afterwards, there'll be a few going around with these yellow flyers. If you're looking for any information, please do approach us. Thank you.
That was lovely. Thank you very much, Tammy. Our next speaker is Valerie, and Valerie is a native of Finglas, but we won't hold that against her. But she feels very connected to Ballymun and feels like Ballymun is her second home. Valerie is telling a story about her personal recovery. Valerie was hijacked from another programme to take part in Speak About Your Lived Experience training, the Speak About Your Lived Experience training programme. And Sandra wants to publicly apologise to Sarah. What's that about? The title of Valerie's story is From Faith, F-A-T-E, to Faith, F-A-I-T-H. So please welcome Valerie to the stage.
I come from a very sports-orientated family. I represented my country and I captained teams to some historical sporting moments for my club and my county. These achievements led me to lift a winner's cup just like this one. As the cup was passed down to all members of the winning team, we felt such pride and joy in our achievements. The cup represented so much to all of us. To me, it was a culmination of the weeks and months of hard slog and all sorts of weather, always putting training first. It paid off nicely for us. And as the cup was passed down to all members of the team, I was reminded of a story of the time I was born. It was a Holy Thursday. It was 11:45 p.m. It was a Holy Thursday, the 7th of April, 1977. And the story goes like this. In the early hours of a snowy Good Friday morning, I was less than an hour old, And my dad and all his teammates had landed up into the Rotunda Hospital from Conway's pub across the road, demanding to see me. So with all the commotion going on in the corridor, the matron, she ran in and she took me from my mother's arms and she brought me out to where my dad and his hurling teammates were waiting to welcome me. So she handed me over to my dad, unwashed. And my dad took his firstborn and he proudly passed me down the line, just like a cup. My dad was wearing a green khaki jacket that morning belonging to his friend Joe, and it had got stained with my blood. And Joe turned to my dad and he said, "Peter, I'm never going to wash this." It would seem in that moment that my fate was sealed. Or was it? As I looked back and I seen how proud and full of joy my dad was in that moment, I wished that my cup was filled with that joy too. From the outside, you would have believed that I had achieved it all. But with every win, just as quick as I won, that sense of joy was fleeting. And I was chasing after the next high. And then it dawned on me that my spiritual cup was empty. Two years ago, all of that changed. I felt so disconnected from everything. And I felt like I was outside of my body, looking down at just how empty my life was. And I looked back at all the events and the achievements that I had over the years, and I realised that I had no real connection to any of it. It felt like all that emptiness that had consumed me was like spilling out all around me, and I was as empty as a person could be. You see, I'd been filling up my cup with everybody else's expectations of me, and that only led me to believe that I was never good enough. I so wanted to feel that sense of joy in my achievements, but I just couldn't feel it. So instead, I pressed my button of self-destruction, of drink and drugs. I had been doing this from a very young age, and I believed that that was the only way that I could feel that joy. That only brought me to isolation. I'd only come out of the house once in 6 months. And any trace of self-care had gone out the window. I had lost all faith in everything, everyone, and especially in myself. And in that moment, I had given up on life. And in the depths of that darkness, I called out to Jesus. growing up in a Catholic family, I'd heard about Jesus, but I didn't actually know him. And that day was the first time for me of forming a relationship with him. He came and he turned on a light within me. And he asked me to trust him. And he asked me to follow him. And I heard his voice of unconditional love reassuring me that everything was going to be okay. You see, I surrendered that day. And a sense of peace came upon me like I had never felt before. He would teach, and with that came a knowingness that darkness was being illuminated and I was being led in a new direction. He would teach me his way, the truth, and a new way of filling up my cup with an abundance of gifts, such as courage, a sense of belonging, acceptance, and helping others. The anticipation for what the future holds has now replaced fear. I trust that all things are possible has replaced hopelessness. But most of all, peace, mercy, and joy has replaced the pain, guilt, and shame. I'd have never stood up on a stage like this before. But today, my cup overflows with the power of love, support, and worthiness. So, what started off as my faith actually led me to my faith. And I am so grateful for that. So today, I encourage you to remember that in the darkest moments of your life, to keep that hope alive and know that the hand of God is a lot closer than you think. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. So our next speaker is Sandra Losty, and Sandra is the training coordinator with the Ballymun Youth Action Project, and she's also a founder of a volunteer-led online all-inclusive recovery space called Recovery Hour, and I presume there's some links to that people can look up, that supports people in recovery with a focus on personal development and storytelling. Sandra trained all the participants taking the stage today in her storytelling program called Speak About Your Lived Experience. And she has in brackets safely and confidentially. But they were very brave coming here today and sharing it. The title of Sandra's story is Recovery Posse. So please welcome Sandra to the stage.
The term posse comes from the Latin posse communitatis. Very fancy term, isn't it? Thankfully, we use that word now as simply posse, and we refer to it as people who are interested in one another and have a similar common purpose. Back in the day, the posse was the people you'd know from the movies, the cattle rustlers, had the posse after them to get the cattle back. You'd know that from the Western movies, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. I'm not saying which one I am today. We'll leave that to your good selves. So recovery posse, what does that mean? We're not chasing cattle and we're not going after any of the bad guys, but we're very much keeping in that line of people who are interested in one another. And when it comes to recovery, and I'm a person in recovery myself, being interested in other people is crucial. And it's how we connect with other people. And we know the science is in that connection does things that other people or other things cannot do for people who are looking for support and for help. We know how important that connection is to have another person who has a similar experience that we do, that we can be ourselves and we can share. Or indeed have a very warm audience like your good selves here today who are interested in what the speakers have to say and came along to support them. When that person shows that interest in somebody and it's genuine and it's sincere, we know that that has a huge positive impact on the brain. Again, the science is in, we can see that. There's a few images floating around the internet, I'm sure that you could check that out on. So when the pandemic hit in 2020, what happened to that recovery community? That community that relied on connection, physical, just as close as you are to me right now. We were huggers. Most of us are huggers. At the very least, we're handshakers. We'll make some sort of a contact with a person, that human contact that's so important. And as the world shut down for everybody, it wasn't just for the recovery community, as it shut down, all of that was taken away. Huge, important thing in someone's recovery is to have that contact with another person. Well, we did what they did on the movies, and we rounded up the posse. And we checked in with people, and we did a head count, and we said, where's Wombat Wally? Where's MacGyver Matt? All these names that people were given, all these nicknames. I don't know what my nickname is. I don't think anybody is brave enough to tell me what my nickname was, but I'll leave that with you for the moment. So we rounded people up, and we said, we know that this is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. We're going to adapt. And for anybody in recovery, you know that adapting is your survival. If you don't adapt, things get very difficult. So we're kind of used to adapting. Some people are around a number of years and you kind of a bit of practice at adapting. And we know that we have to make a change. We have to adapt with the climate that we're in. And the pandemic forced us all to adapt in so many ways. We all had to adapt, not just the recovery community. So how did we adapt? Well, we took what we were used to, being face-to-face, sitting close to each other, shaking hands, having cups of coffee, giving hugs, all that sort of stuff, and we brought it online, like so many other institutions did. We brought it online. I was very active on Twitter at the time, and we were talking openly about being in recovery. So people would come in and they'd say, I have a day under my belt, I haven't had a drink, I haven't had a drug, and the posse swarmed around them and went, come on in here, you belong right here with us. And people would say, but you don't know what I've done. We don't care, come on in, you're one of us. Belonging straight away and connection straight away. So when we went on Zoom, what changed for us was we were used to typed messages, hashtags, all that sort of stuff. And we actually saw people face to face for the first time. And we heard their voices, because you won't hear that when you're just on social media. And we heard accents. We heard accents from New Zealand, from Australia, from Alaska, Canada, all over the world we heard these accents. And while I knew they were from these different parts of the world, I didn't quite grasp the widespread of the recovery community. So I had to have a think about, how did this grow? How did this grow into this movement? Johanna talked about it here in Ireland. How are we at the stage now where we're doing events like this talking about recovery? And we have to take it back, maybe 100 years ago or maybe even a little bit longer, but definitely at the onset of the 12-step meetings, those fellowships that got set up back in the 1930s. They were that group that came together, stayed together, and they grew. One person talking to another person. I get you. I understand. I've been there. I've done that. I haven't quite done that thing, but I felt the same. Straight away, we had that acceptance, and we had somebody who was interested in us doing well. Most of us came from backgrounds where people hoped we were never going to appear at their door again, And here we had a group of people who were genuinely rooting for us and hoping that we would do well. So the groups grew. They went into hospitals. They went into the institutions where the people were in these drunk tanks and these inebriate hospitals. Or if you had a few bob, you were in a dry sanatorium. Yeah, got a fancy name for that one if you had a few bob. And all of these therapies that were happening for people trying to, divert their alcohol use or their drug use, they were working for a while and then they fell short. And the medical community was baffled by this, and very much in those times we were looking at the moral model. We looked at people as morally deficient. If they knew what they were doing, they'd stop, or if they could see the harm, or why don't they stop? Why don't they just stop? Can they not see? And didn't understand what was at play. There was something much bigger at play. And we had, luckily enough, we definitely had a medical person on the side of people who were in sanatoriums who saw that connection, one person to another, and saw that what he called a miracle. He called it a miracle. The change in that third person, two people went and had a conversation and said, we've been there, this can happen, this can change for you. So the medical community now send people to those support groups because they know the magic and the power that's in them. They know that it's there. And I know people need medical interventions in other ways, but they're generally directed towards those support groups. So over the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, lots of the stuff was, groups growing, the movement was growing, it was getting into Europe, it was in Australia, it was all over the world. People were getting literature, they wanted to know, how do I get what you have? They posted out books, they posted out literature. And people, particularly in rural communities, were getting well. They were making changes and they were getting well based on the literature only. Isn't that phenomenal? Absolutely phenomenal. But I want to say, recovery it's online now, as we know, it's everywhere. But in the 70s, a little magic kind of a thing happened. And that was this invention of this. The CB radio. There's probably a CB radio heads in the audience today. Or you might know them from movies like Convoy and that sort of stuff, Breaker, all that kind of thing. But there was one person in Australia who was miles away from anywhere, like a day away from anywhere else, took a chance, got their CB radio, and this is what they did. Anyone got their ears on, could sure do with a chat. Connection made. Connection made. So it may have started with the CB radio that we talk in this way, and it's moved on, as we know, exponentially onto platforms like Zoom. We no longer have to root in our bags for 20 pence pieces to make phone calls in telephone boxes or any of that sort of stuff. We can hop on a Zoom and we can connect with people. And for most people who really love the hug and really love the handshake and really love the cup of coffee and the sitting down and the being together, when that physical proximity of another person is not there, we have to make do with what the next best thing is. Just like when we were out there active, if what we wanted wasn't available to us, we made do with something else. So that philosophy just transferred over into, how do I stay in recovery? Well, having a cup of tea with someone's not available, I'm going to go online. Absolutely go online. So I want to tell you about the Recovery Posse. And the Recovery Posse is a group of people, just as I described there, people who are interested in other people in recovery, reaching out to other people saying, it's okay, come on in, have a chat with us, we'll give you information, we'll direct you somewhere. And I got to thinking, in the pandemic, I saw people on social media, I saw people, particularly on Twitter, bringing the new tool and resource that they learned to deal with the pandemic. And here's what they were saying. I've just come across this great thing. I can't believe I didn't come across this before. And we were all like, what is it, what is it, what is it? A day at a time. Let go, let God. And we were like, we've been saying that for decades. This is how we have survived. We've hung on to these mantras and these sayings to keep us in our recovery. And the rest of the world was catching up with us. Can you imagine that? We were leading the way and they were catching up with us. For the first time, I actually felt I was ahead of the posse. Isn't that amazing? Absolutely amazing. So what I want to leave you with is recovery posse is not just about people in recovery, because it's the posse part of that phrase or that sentence that's important. I know who's in my posse. I'm very blessed and honoured to have a family member who offered me a cup of tea that changed my life. If she hadn't have offered me that cup of tea, I'd have been out the door and God knows what would have happened to me. She's one person in my posse. My other significant person is my good friend, Johanna Ivers. And I love calling her Professor Ivers, and she tells me, stop, but I love how she's made a difference in this recovery movement. And there's other people in my life who are part of my posse, some of them in recovery and some of them are not. But they're people who care about me, they're interested in me. They ask me, how can I help Sandra? What do you need from me? How can I help you? And they all make up part of my posse. So I leave you with that question. Who is in your posse? And when you work out who they are, please go and tell them. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Is it Sandra or is it Wyatt Earp? That's an older joke. So we'd just like to ask all the speakers to come back out on the stage, and just so you can just show your appreciation for them. So we had Johanna who spoke about the stories that are important, and the stories that inform science, and science then informs policy and practice. We had Brian talking about the different elements and colours that actually make up a community, and he demonstrated that in a very lovely way. We had Tammy talking about how very, very important families are, and that lovely image of the breakfast, and rewinding a couple of years before then. We had Valerie who spoke about her own personal journey towards recovery. And then we had Sandra talking about the recovery posse and the importance of the community and the connection and the importance of that communal aspect of recovery. So just like to thank them all and bring them back out on stage. And then we'd really like to also thank Dee. Dee is going to come up and do I was a bit previous with my introduction earlier, but Dee is going to come up and just to say thanks to Dee for these fantastic poems that she's shared with us over Recovery Month. And Dee is going to finish with Up the Flats. I got that wrong as well.
Here we go. This is called Rise Up for Recovery. Rise up. Rise up all those who've been in shadow and shame. To those who think they know you, but don't even know your name. They don't know your story. They don't know your trauma and pain. Rise up. To those who walk as ghosts and live in their old haunts. Rise up when they put you down. Push through when they put you out. Rise up. To those who hold their past against you and keep tarring you with the same old brush. To forgive yourself, you're in no rush. You may have wronged them and caused them pain. You ask them not to hold you a prisoner of lifelong disdain. Stand up. Rise up, stand up. Those who put their hands up. Those who said, I need help, but can't do it by themselves. Those who've been and gone through hell, so they'll never go through hell again. Rise up, stand up. Rise up, stand up in and for recovery. Stand no longer in shadow and shame, so others can do the same. Stand. Rise. Rise up. Rise up for recovery. Rise up. Rise up. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone. And there's some leaflets outside for just for the rest of the events for this fantastic Recovery Month. And just to say a big thanks to everyone that's been involved in organising all of the events, especially today's event. But thanks to the Recovery Committee and everyone that's lended their hand over the last few weeks to this. And safe journey.